who were fighting to make the civil rights movement happen and make things better. But I think one thing that really stuck with me from the museum was they had this hallway of pictures of like newspaper clippings and photos from the civil rights movement. And it ended, on one side it ended in 2019 with a picture of a 15-year-old boy being taken away from his mother because he was going to jail. And that was really kind of the most upsetting part at that time for me, because I think it's like the same age as all of us, and I don't think any of us could even imagine being taken away from our parents at that age. And so that really stuck with me from this. Then we went to the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, and they had this huge memorial where it talked about all the people who had been hung and lynched. And you can see there's one, Charlotte Harris. She was lynched in Rockingham County in Harrisonburg because a white man's barn burnt down. Not even because they thought she did it, just maybe her brother did, or we aren't really sure, but she was killed for that. And on the wall, you can see there's a wall with writing, and that writing, I think we all thought that was really cool, and it says, "For the hanged and beaten, for the shot, drowned, and burned, for the tortured, tormented, and terrorized, for those abandoned by the rule of law, we will remember. With hope, because hopelessness is the enemy of justice. With courage, because peace requires bravery. With persistence, because justice is a constant struggle. With faith, because we shall overcome." And I think the we will remember part was a really, that's why we went on this trip, was to learn about the people who died, the people who fought, and we want to remember them and honor their memory, and that's what this entire memorial is giving honor to those people. So I think that part really sunk in, and also just in Harrisonburg, the fact that a woman was killed, and that really kind of brought it closer to home. And there were so many statues you can see on the bottom left. There's one that shows the slaves being taken to America. So I think that was really influential in the way we thought about this. Then next we went to Selma, and we met with Joanne Bland. She marched in Bloody Sunday when she was 8 years old. I think everyone knows what Bloody Sunday is, but if you don't, it was March 7th, 1965. Citizens had organized a march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama, and they were beaten by police on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and they were pushed back with tear gas, and people as young as 8 years old were hurt by that, including Joanne Bland, and that happened one more time when they went and tried again, and then the third time they were finally able to march because they got permission, they fought back. And Joanne Bland, we all really liked her. She was very kind of upfront. She didn't really hold back at all. I think she kind of gave us a new understanding of what it feels like to have grown up in that time and grown up being 8 years old and being in a march and being hurt by police. She took us to these memorials that had names on them. And the memorials were for people who maybe didn't play like a part that is talked about in school, but were still important because they were in the civil rights movement, and she had us remember a name. And I remember my name, it was Andrew Durgan. And he went on this march and he was killed. And I think the little things like that, she had us remember those names, and she had us pick up rocks from the piece of concrete. Bottom left is the photo, and she's looking at G-Man. And it was the concrete, or I guess up there it's bottom, yes, the bottom left, okay. And she had us go to the concrete where they all met before they marched on Bloody Sunday. And she had us pick up that rock, and she had us remember the names, and I think that gave us a very kind of single physical thing to remember about this trip. Kind of it connected us to this one person who marched, or this one person who had a rock and gathered there. And it made us feel very connected. I think that was a big part of what she was trying to teach us. And then I think the thing that I remember most about our visit with Joanne Bland is we went to this amazing, this beautiful graveyard. It's the photo with the tree. And it was like we were looking at everything, we were thinking, oh, these are such beautiful flowers, the trees are beautiful. And then you look out the window and there are Confederate flags sticking out of the ground, like on every grave. And there's these Confederate flags on poles, like on flagpoles. And she tells us that we're in the Confederate Circle. So this beautiful graveyard in Alabama, in Selma, Alabama, has a Confederate Circle. And there's, I think like in the middle, bottom, is the memorial to Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. And he has a memorial in this town where so many civil rights things happened, which was just really, it was really angering. It was really disconcerting because you're like, why is this here? Why is it still allowed to be here? Why are people continuing to put Confederate flags here? Because they were new flags. They hadn't like been there and they're being preserved. Why is this still happening? And I think that was really what she wanted us to be thinking about during our trip with her. Does anyone else? I can't remember someone else.
Someone talking about this.
Okay. So then we went to have lunch with Sister Ayaya, and her restaurant is called By the River. And it focuses a lot on what they call the African experience. So they teach people, they do shows there, and mostly they have they serve food there. And what part of the African experience is they have people who march, and they walk where people walking at this bridge, and then they come and take them back to back to this building, and it's all dark, and they have actors who come in and pretend to be people who were on the ships or people who were being beaten by police, and so you really kind of feel like you were there. And we didn't end up doing that. I think that would have been a little bit too much, even for this trip, because she said it was very disturbing, even for a lot of older people. But she taught us a lot about importance, and during this time, Joanne Bland also taught us about her main theme, which is that you are a piece of the puzzle. I think what she said was, you are the piece of the puzzle for a better future. And it really focused on individual importance to the civil rights movement, because if you can't form connections with people and you can't all join together, then it's never going to go anywhere. And so that was a really big part of this trip here. Okay, then we actually marched on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which is where Bloody Sunday happened. And there's pictures of the bridge up there, but I think what was most important about this part was the memorial at the end. They had memorials for all the, for Martin Luther King, and there was also a memorial there for, it says, Tomb of the Unknown Slave, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And so it's basically saying we don't have memorials for everyone who fought, but they still deserve to be remembered because they still played such a big part in this movement, in this journey, in this fight. And there's a big painting on the wall that has Martin Luther King, and I think Reverend Duke Belby, and a lot of people. And so this was just it kind of reminded us that there's memorials here, and there's things that we're trying to remember, but we also have to take this and to use it and continue fighting for what we think is important, which is, in this case, was the civil rights movement. So, let's see. Leroy Clemens. So we learned a lot on this trip about the three civil rights workers. Their names were Michael Chorner, James Chaney, and Andrew Goodman. They were murdered during Freedom Summer after they were investigating the burning of Mount Zion Methodist Church. So Freedom Summer was in 1964, and it was when a lot of people were coming down from the north, mostly white college students were coming down from the north, and they were doing things like they would help people enlist to vote. Because at the time, African American and people of color, they couldn't vote really, and so they were helping them pass tests, and they were taking these tests for them, and they were going on marches, and they were fighting. And Michael Chorner and Andrew Goodman were both college students from the north who came down and met James Chaney. And when they found out that Mount Zion Methodist Church had been burned by the Ku Klux Klan, they went to investigate it, and because of that, they were targeted by the Ku Klux Klan and by the police. Edgar Ray Killen was the sheriff at the time, and he actually sent people off to kill them. And so they were murdered. We're trying to remember them because they were all very young, and they were murdered by police with Ku Klux Klan. And so Leroy Clemens really wanted to really talk to us a lot about them. And Leroy Clemens, was actually the one who who ended up getting Edgar Ray Killen put in jail roughly 40 years after the 3 civil rights workers were murdered. So Edgar Ray Killen was put in jail he had 20 years for each murder, so 60 years, and that ended up being a life sentence for him. And Leroy Clemens also talked a lot about forming connections to other people, forming relationships with people who aren't like you. But that was, we talked a lot about that, the Choctaw Indians. So. Okay.
So yeah, like Eleanor said, I think this part of the trip was really inspirational and really fun because it was about taking those connections and making connections, because we've been hearing a lot about making connections. So we went up and we met with Choctaw tribe, and it was really interesting because they also had, I think, 4 or 5 high schoolers, so like people our age that we got to like talk to, and like I think the bottom right picture we're like playing concentration, and we were playing basketball and just like games, so it was really fun. But when we got there, we went to their church, and they were singing some hymns in the Choctaw language, which is hymns that we knew, but it was in their language. It was really interesting. And then we drove out, and we went to, they have like a sacred hill, and I forget the name, but...
It was Nanawoya.
Yeah, that. And we had long pieces of cardboard boxes, and we got to slide down the hill, and my shoes are still very dirty from that. We fell a lot, but it was really fun. And then we went back and we talked some more, we asked questions, and then they made us dinner, and we had a really good dinner. We had fry bread, which is basically just flour and water that you mix together and you fry, and it's something we made a lot on reservations because like that's what you had. And we had like a lot of their traditional food, and it was really good, and then we just played some more with them. And so I think this part of the trip was really, really important because we got to take some connections and just connect with some people our age, but people that we wouldn't normally get to know or hang out with, so it was really fun.
And one thing I also thought was interesting is in that photo right there is the sign that says, "Please do not slide down the mount," and then that is a photo of us sliding down the mount. So that was something fun there. Okay.
So here we are at Pine Lake Fellowship Camp, and this is a camp that was started in the mid-60s, and it has special meaning for me because I was born in Meridian, the town where this is, and my father and grandfather started this camp as one of the first camps where black and brown, Choctaw, and white people could all go to camp together. And so this camp has grown tremendously since we were there. And one of the interesting things when we were at the Nanawoya church, that church actually, the Choctaw Indian church, was bombed with dynamite 3 times, and then people came back and built it up again, and then it would be bombed again, and that happened 3 times. And when this camp was purchased, the first building was made with some of the concrete blocks that came from the bombed church. And so one of the themes for me that was so significant is the resilience and the beauty that comes from terrible things that happen. Out of the bombings come this new life in the camp. And I think that's one of the stories we heard time and time again, is that wonderful things are being done today, and beautiful people were resilient even through all of this trauma that they went through. At the bottom of our journal that we wrote in every day was the verse from Micah 6:8, and says something like this: "What does God ask of us is to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God." And we saw so many people doing this, and we saw so many people trying to act justly and do justice when we see somebody is hurting and somebody's not being treated fairly. Think about what you can do, and it was very inspiring to all of us. The other thing that I would just say is that we were not going down there to learn Black history. It was our history. It's your history. It's my history. And it's important for us to know what it is and to make sure these things don't happen again. Was there somebody else that wanted to get into?
On Sunday morning, we went to a church of the Nazarene in Mississippi near the camp. and we actually got lost on the way there. We got an address that was not the right address, and we asked for directions, and he gave us directions that were not the right directions. So we got there a couple minutes late, but it was okay because the pastor was late also. When I say that this service is not like anything you've ever experienced before, I mean that. It was very loud. It was very interactive and participatory. There, at the church I go to, there is one singular person who often reacts to the things that are in the sermon, like amen, right? And I thought it was just like, that guy's weird, but it's very much a Southern thing, right? People were shouting like, yes, amen, like say that, preacher, right? And the singing was very Southern singing. It was very like soulful kind of gospel. And yeah, it was strange in a good way. It was not like anything I've ever been through, like experienced before, but I'm glad I got to experience that.
And just one thing I felt like we all kind of said about this church was that everyone felt more connected. I felt like we were connected to each other. They felt like we were connected to the sermon, and they were connected kind of to God. And they all felt really, it was like they were all very free. They were unashamed. And I feel like that was really a beautiful part of this. And also, there's a lady in the middle photo, in the blue, and at one point I saw her pull out a sparkly blue fan that matched her outfit and was fanning herself, and I just thought that was fun and incredible. So I think our main takeaway as a group, there are a few of them. I think understanding was a big one. We definitely learned a lot of facts on this trip, but I think if you asked any of us kind of what we did on this trip, what we learned, we would talk about how we have a greater understanding and we have a greater kind of appreciation for what happened and what people really went through. It doesn't feel as far off now. We feel more connected to that, which is the second bullet point, connection. We also feel like we understand that we have to make connections between other people, because a lot of people talked about that. Joanne Bland, Leroy Clemens, Larry Miller, they all encourage us to do that. We also feel, I think most of us said that we feel very encouraged. The people who we were talking to kept saying that our generation was the one that was going to bring hope and they were going to make change. And hope is obviously the fourth bullet point, but it made us feel like, it kind of made us want to do that and feel as though that's something that really is possible now. And the last bullet point is just piece of the puzzle, because that was something that we kept talking about as a group after Joanne Bland. And so I think we all really kind of connected on this trip, and we all feel like we've gained a lot from going on this tour, and so we're all very grateful for that. Also, this is not as important, I just wanted to share it. I did some very big math, and we did like 34 plus hours of driving, so there are some fun driving photos, and thank you.
Eleanor put together some slides I think that we're going to play as you go out as